At dawn, outside a quiet house in the city of Thebes, the strongest man who ever lived knelt in the dust and could not remember what he had done. His hands were empty. His lion-skin cloak, the one that marked him as the son of a god, lay in the dirt beside him. Inside the house, nothing moved. Smoke from a cold hearth drifted through the open doorway, and somewhere across the waking city, a temple bell tolled the hour, indifferent to what had happened before sunrise. For the rest of his life, he would try to answer for that morning. 12 years of impossible labors, sent into the wilderness to fight monsters no other man could face, not as glory, but as punishment. How does the greatest hero in Greek mythology become a man serving a penance he can never fully pay? This is the true story behind Heracles, the one the poets told before, later ages softened it. A story not of triumph, but of madness sent by a jealous goddess and the wreckage it left behind. If you enjoy these stories, take a moment to subscribe. It truly helps this channel, and tell me in the comments which myth you'd like next. Now settle in, and let's go back to the beginning, to a child the queen of the gods decided to hate before he had even drawn his first breath. Heracles was born already marked for disaster, though he would not understand why until it was far too late. His father was Zeus, king of the gods, who had come to a mortal woman named Alcmene in the shape of her own husband, and left her carrying a child unlike any other. His mother's rival, Hera, queen of the gods, had spent centuries watching Zeus father children on mortal women, and she despised every one of them. Heracles, she hated more than most, because Zeus had all but promised that this particular son would one day rule over his kinsmen, and Hera decided, long before the boy could walk, that he would not live to see it. She sent 2 serpents into his cradle one night, gliding silently across the nursery floor toward the infant twins asleep inside. His brothers screamed. Heracles, barely old enough to sit upright, is said to have seized a snake in each fist and calmly strangled them both, laughing, while the household came running with torches to find him holding 2 dead serpents like a pair of toys. The unease in that house did not fade quickly. A child who could kill without visible effort was as unsettling as he was miraculous, and no one there yet understood that the miracle would double one day as a curse. It should have warned everyone what kind of life lay ahead of him, a life of extraordinary strength, and a goddess who would never, ever stop hunting him. He grew into a young man of frightening power, taller and stronger than any other in Greece, trained in wrestling and archery and the great club he would carry for the rest of his days. And in time, he did what most young men of his age did. He fell in love and he married. Her name was Megara, a princess of Thebes, given to Heracles as a bride after he had saved the city from a besieging army and earned the gratitude of her father, the king. By every account that survives, the marriage was a genuinely happy one, not a political arrangement endured out of duty, but something closer to real love. They settled in Thebes and had children together, 3 or 4 sons depending on which ancient poet is telling the story, boys who grew up watching their father's extraordinary strength with the uncomplicated pride that children feel for a parent they adore. Heracles, for all his size and power, is remembered in these years less as a monster slayer than as a father, carrying his sons on his shoulders through the market, teaching them to draw a bow, sitting outside their home in the evening while the smoke of dinner curled up from the chimney and Megara sang inside. By the standards of any age, it was an ordinary and precious kind of happiness. Far above the rooftops of Thebes, though, on a mountain wrapped in cloud, Hera had never once stopped watching him. The years since the snakes in the cradle had cooled nothing in her. She had simply been waiting for a moment when destroying Heracles would hurt him more than killing him ever could. And now, watching him laugh in his own doorway with his sons around his knees, she had found it. Hera's chosen weapon this time was not a snake, and not a monster, but madness itself. In the old sources, madness is not just a state of mind, but an actual spirit, a goddess named Lyssa, and Hera sent her down from the mountain into the house of Heracles like a fever loosed into the blood. Lyssa did not want the task. Even she is said to have hesitated, arguing that Heracles had done nothing to deserve it. But a command from the Queen of the Gods could not be refused. She entered the house at dusk, invisible, and settled over the mind of the man inside it like a fog rolling in off the sea. High above, on her cold mountain, Hera did not look away. What happened next, the old poets refuse to describe in any detail, and perhaps that refusal is its own kind of mercy. They say only that something came over Heracles that night, a darkness that stole his reason entirely, so that the man who looked out through his own eyes no longer recognized the people standing in front of him. The strength that had strangled serpents in the cradle and would soon put down lions and hydras was, for a handful of terrible minutes, turned loose inside his own home, with no one guiding it and no one able to stop it. By the time the fog lifted from his mind, it was already morning. Heracles woke as if from a long sleep, in the gray light before dawn, kneeling in a house that had gone completely silent. He did not remember what had happened in the night, only that his hands ached and that the courtyard around him was strewn and overturned, as though a storm had passed through it, and when he called out, nothing answered. The neighbors who gathered in the doorway would not meet his eyes, and no one among them spoke first. Slowly, and then all at once, Heracles understood what the silence in his own house meant and what he had done while Hera's madness held him. Megara was gone. His sons were gone. The home that had been, only the evening before, full of the ordinary noise of a family at the end of the day, held nothing now but overturned furniture and a stillness that would never fully leave him. The old writers, out of respect or horror or both, do not linger on the details of that morning. They tell, instead of what came after, a man who had been the strongest in Greece falling to his knees in the wreckage of his own doorway, understanding at last that the goddess who had hated him since before his birth had finally found the one weapon strong enough to break him, not a monster, not an army, but his own hands. Grief of that size does not have a name in most languages, and the ancient Greeks did not pretend that Heracles simply recovered from it. He is said to have wandered from Thebes half out of his mind with horror, unable to look at the city that had once been his home, seeking out anyone who might tell him how a man survives what he had survived. In the end he went to Delphi, to the oracle of Apollo, where the priestess who spoke for the god sat above a fissure in the rock, breathing whatever vapors gave her the power to see what mortals could not. Heracles asked her how he could possibly atone for what Hera's madness had made him do. Her answer was not comfort. She told him to travel to Tiryns and to place himself in the service of a distant cousin of his named Eurystheus, a king Heracles privately despised, and to perform without complaint whatever labors the king demanded of him for the next 12 years. Only then, the oracle said, could the stain of that night be lifted from him. By any measure, it was a harsh sentence for a crime committed under a madness he had never asked for and could not have resisted. But Heracles did not argue. He traveled to Tiryns, knelt before the king he hated, and asked to be given his labors. And Hera, watching from her mountain, made certain that Eurystheus chose the very worst tasks he could imagine. The labors that followed have been told and retold so many times that they have almost become a checklist. But for Heracles, living through them, each one was simply another year of punishing, grinding penance. The first sent him into the hills of Nemean, where a lion with a hide no blade could pierce had been terrorizing the countryside. Heracles hunted it into its own cave and strangled it barehanded, then wore its pelt ever after, the same lion-skin cloak that would mark him for the rest of his life. Next came the Hydra of Lerna, a serpent of many heads that grew 2 more for every one he severed, coiling in its swamp until Heracles and his nephew Iolaus worked out, through trial and exhausted improvisation, how to seal each wound before a new head could rise. There was a king's filthy stables to be cleaned in a single day, which Heracles solved by tearing open the walls and driving an entire river through them. There was a wild boar dragged down half-frozen from a snow-choked mountain, a flock of monstrous birds with feathers like bronze arrowheads driven shrieking from a marsh, and a raging bull wrestled to stillness on the shore of Crete. Each labor stranger than the last, each one chosen by a king who wanted him to fail, and a goddess who wanted him dead. Years passed this way. Heracles grew famous across Greece for feats no other man could have survived, and almost no one who cheered for him at the end of each labor understood that he was not chasing glory at all. One impossible task at a time, he was trying to earn back the right to exist. The later labors took him further from anything resembling an ordinary life, into places no living man was meant to go. He traveled to the edge of the known world for the golden apples of the Hesperides, guarded by a great serpent coiled around a tree in a garden at the far rim of the earth, and returned only after tricking the Titan Atlas, who bore the weight of the heavens on his shoulders at the edge of that same garden, into fetching the apples himself, while Heracles held the sky for one unbearable, muscle-tearing moment. He descended, at the very end, into the underworld itself. Down through caverns of gray stone and standing black water, past the shades of the dead, to drag the three-headed hound Cerberus up into the daylight and prove that even the gates of death could not hold him back. Each labor should have killed him. Each one, instead, seemed to prove something the ancient audience needed to believe, that suffering endured honestly, without complaint, without giving up, could eventually pay down even the largest debt a person could owe. Heracles did not perform these labors for applause, and the stories that survive make a point of showing him weary, wounded, sometimes despairing in the years between them. A man who had lost count of how long he had been paying for one terrible night he still could not fully remember. Slowly, labor by labor, monster by monster, the years began to run out. Eurystheus ran out of tasks strange enough to satisfy him, and at last, after 12 years of exile and penance, Heracles was told that his service was complete. The labors ended, but nothing about Heracles' life was ever fully repaired. Megara and his sons were not restored to him. No labor, however impossible, could undo one night of madness, and the old stories make clear that grief stayed with him in some form for the rest of his days, threaded quietly beneath every later triumph. What he did earn, through 12 years of monsters and impossible tasks performed at the far edges of the world, was something closer to peace than to forgiveness, a life he had rebuilt with his own hands, one labor at a time, when nothing in him wanted to go on. He went on to more adventures after Tyrants, sailed with heroes, fought in wars, and eventually, the myths say, ascended to Olympus itself and was welcomed among the gods, even, in some versions, reconciled at last with Hera, the goddess who had hunted him since before his birth. Strange as it is to end on that note, the Greeks seemed to feel that strangeness too. Heracles is remembered as the strongest man who ever lived, yet the truest part of his story was never about strength at all. It was about what a person does with a guilt too large to carry, not explaining it away, not running from it, but walking, labor after labor, towards something that might one day resemble atonement. If this is the kind of story you want more of, take a moment to subscribe and tell me in the comments which myth I should tell next. Sleep well.